Security cameras are supposed to protect us. They're the quiet guardians in the corners of our rooms, watching when we sleep, recording when we aren't looking. But what if, one night, they started showing you something that shouldn't be there, not an intruder, not a burglar, something that shouldn't exist at all? It started with a man named Greg, a small grocery store owner in a quiet town. He'd been losing things at night. A few cans, a broom, a box of cereal that had clearly been moved. It wasn't much, but he could feel it. The air in the store felt wrong after dark, thick, still, as if the building itself was holding its breath. So Greg bought a few cheap cameras, set them up in every corner, and decided to catch whoever was messing with his store. For 4 nights, everything looked normal. Just dust floating through the air, the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint buzz of an empty refrigerator. Then came the 5th night. The footage began the same way, empty aisles, nothing moving, until 2:37 a.m. At first it looked like the lens caught a flicker of light. Then it focused. A shape stood in the doorway of the storage room, small, pale, and hunched. It didn't move, it didn't breathe. It just stood there, staring directly into the camera. You could almost make out the outline of a face, except the features weren't right. The eyes seemed too far apart, the mouth stretched too low, and then, in a single, unnatural motion, it tilted its head. And the cold seemed to creep through the tiles, up through the soles of his shoes. The silence pressed in harder. Then from the monitor, the faintest flicker, a blink of static in the corner camera. The one pointed toward the storage room. He froze. The camera flickered again, twice, like it was trying to focus. 2:36 a.m. The static cleared, and in that split second, something shifted in the grainy footage. The shape was there again, faint but unmistakable, just standing, barely visible in the doorway. This time, it was closer to the lens. Greg leaned forward, eyes locked. He could see the faint outline of what might have been a face, but it wasn't clear. The longer he stared, the harder it was to understand what he was looking at. It was like the pixels themselves were resisting shape, rearranging constantly, never forming one complete image. The motion detection icon blinked red in the corner, then the figure tilted its head, slowly, deliberately. Greg's breath caught in his throat. It felt like the room itself had stopped breathing with him. The camera feed shimmered, not glitching, not freezing, but pulsing, like a heartbeat. Each flicker seemed timed with his own racing pulse, the sound of it filling his ears. Then the figure took one step forward, and the feed went dark. Every other camera remained on. Every aisle, every corner, perfectly normal. Only that one feed, the storage room, was gone, replaced with a black screen. Greg sat completely still, waiting, staring into that void on the monitor, and then, faintly through the speakers, a low, distorted whisper that didn't sound like static at all. It said his name. The store was nothing special, just a narrow, old-fashioned grocery tucked between a laundromat and an auto repair shop. The kind of place people stopped by after work for milk or bread, where the lights always buzzed a little too loud, and the tile floor never quite looked clean no matter how much you mopped it. Greg had owned it for years. Every shelf, every creak of the floor, every flickering light was familiar to him. That's what made the nights feel even stranger, when the familiar started to feel wrong. After closing, the store took on a different life. The chatter of customers was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of freezers and the occasional drip from a leaky pipe near the back. The air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and old produce. It was cold, always colder at night than it should have been, like the building exhaled when the lights went out. Greg would sweep the aisles, lock up, check the cameras, and go home. Routine, safe. Until it wasn't. That night, rain tapped gently on the glass doors, the steady rhythm blending with the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A flicker of thunder somewhere in the distance. The monitors in the back office glowed dimly, small squares of surveillance footage that showed nothing out of place. A row of cereal boxes, the soda cooler, the employee door that never quite shut all the way. Greg's desk was cluttered with receipts and a half-eaten sandwich. The coffee beside him had gone cold, a thin layer of dust on the rim of the mug. He leaned back in his chair, eyes drifting between the screens. He'd done this hundreds of times before, half expecting nothing, half hoping he'd finally catch whoever was sneaking in. The store was still, but it wasn't quiet. Somewhere between the back room and the front door, there was always a faint sound, not loud enough to identify, not constant enough to ignore. A scrape, a sigh, maybe a soft shuffle of something against tile. Every time he got up to check, it would stop. The only proof anything was moving came from the corners of his eyes. A shadow that didn't match the aisles, a faint ripple in the reflection of the freezer glass. The cameras caught everything in black and white. No sound, no color, just movement, if there was any. Greg had adjusted the brightness earlier that week, but the footage still looked grainy, almost too dark for a store with so much light. Sometimes the shadows seemed thicker in certain corners, like the darkness itself clung to specific spots. Outside, a streetlight flickered. The reflection of it flashed through the window and landed on the glass of the front fridge, making it look, for a split second, like someone was standing there. Greg's eyes shot to the monitor. Nothing, just empty aisles again. He told himself it was just the rain, just the wind, just the camera lagging. But when he looked back toward the front doors, the faint outline of a handprint had appeared on the inside of the glass. Fresh, clear, and the door was still locked. The next night, Greg returned early. He didn't tell anyone he was coming back after hours. He just unlocked the door, turned off the lights, and let the cameras do their work. The monitors glowed faintly in the dark, their soft white light casting long, thin shadows across the floor. The store was silent except for the constant hum of the cooling units, the occasional click of the light fixtures, and the faint sound of rain outside. He sat in the chair, watching the screens, the air so still it almost felt like the store was holding its breath again. 1:58 a.m. Nothing. Just the faint static of cheap camera lenses trying to focus in low light. 2:13 a.m. A small shift. The back door camera flickered. Only for a second, but enough for Greg to notice. It wasn't the normal kind of glitch. The footage didn't stutter or blur, it warped, like the space itself bent inward. When it returned to normal, a faint shadow lingered across the frame. It looked like someone standing just out of view, only a shoulder visible in the far corner. Greg leaned forward, squinting. The shoulder didn't move. It didn't sway or breathe. It was just there, half seen, frozen in time. He reached for the rewind key, going back 5 seconds. The shoulder wasn't there before. Forward again. There it was. No sound, no movement. Just the presence of something that wasn't supposed to be. 2:25 a.m. The front camera caught a flicker near the refrigerators. A small distortion rippled through the frame like heat rising off pavement. Greg watched as the cans on the top shelf shifted slightly. One rolled an inch forward, paused, then rolled back into place as if pushed by invisible fingers. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. The air in the office felt heavier now, pressing in. 2:31 a.m. Every monitor flashed. For less than a second, every camera went to static. When the image returned, Greg noticed something strange. Each frame, every single feed, showed the same thing in the same moment. A figure standing halfway down each aisle, not moving, not walking, just there. But the figure didn't stay. As quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Greg played it again, frame by frame. The distortion returned, the faint outline of a person, pale, thin, with something wrong about the shape of the head, like it had been stretched, elongated. In the next frame, nothing. He checked the timestamp. 2:37 a.m., the same time as before. Then, one by one, each monitor began flickering again. The feeds blinked off, then back on, but they weren't showing live footage anymore. Greg's stomach twisted as he realized what he was seeing. The cameras were showing him. Sitting in the office right now, watching the screens, he stared at the monitors. On one of them, in the far right corner, something stood behind him. It wasn't reflected in the glass. It wasn't caught by any sound. But it was there, just barely visible over his shoulder. A shape, still and silent. Greg turned around, nothing. When he looked back at the monitors, every screen had gone black except one. The camera facing the front door. And there, pressed against the glass from the inside, was a pale handprint. Slowly fading from view. Greg never went back after that night. He told himself it wasn't real, that he'd imagined the whole thing, the handprint, the figure, the way the cameras had turned on him. But deep down, he knew what he'd seen. He could still picture it every time he closed his eyes. The pale outline of a body that shouldn't have existed, the way it moved without sound, and that whisper of static that somehow knew his name. He deleted the footage, or at least he thought he did. The files wouldn't stay gone. Every morning, one would reappear in the folder, always time-stamped 2:37 a.m., always the same length, just under 10 seconds long. When he played them, the footage was empty, but there was always something faint in the background, something hard to see unless you slowed it down. A reflection. Sometimes in the freezer door, sometimes in the glass display, sometimes even in the surface of the counter. A figure, still, waiting. Greg unplugged the cameras. He even replaced the computer. But the recordings came back again, saved on their own. New timestamps, new angles. Angles from places that didn't even have cameras. He stopped sleeping after that. Every time the house creaked, or the floor settled, he'd jolt awake. He swore he could hear faint clicking noises, like the sound of a lens trying to focus somewhere in the dark. When he finally worked up the courage to check, the red light on his bedroom smoke detector was blinking faster than usual, almost like it was recording. That's when it hit him. Maybe the cameras weren't just showing what was happening. Maybe they were showing what was coming. The store changed owners a few months later. The new owner replaced everything, floors, shelves, even the security system. But there's something odd that everyone who's worked there since has noticed. Every night at exactly 2:37 a.m., one of the monitors flashes for just a second. If you pause it, frame by frame, there's a reflection in the glass doors at the front of the store. It's faint, almost invisible, but if you stare long enough, you can see it, a shape, watching. Always in the same spot, it doesn't move, it doesn't fade, it just stays there, patient, like it's waiting for someone to notice. And maybe that's the part that really gets under your skin. The idea that something could be staring right at you through a reflection and you wouldn't even know. Maybe it's been there for a long time. Maybe it's watching now. You might think you're safe in your own home, that your cameras are just tools to protect you. But sometimes when you replay the footage, there's a moment, a flicker, a blur, a flash of movement that you tell yourself is nothing. You're probably right, but just for your own peace of mind, maybe check your recordings tonight. See what's staring back.